Hi, I'm Mary, certified relationship coach, Christian sex educator, empty nester, and happy jet skiing wife who believes God's design for sex in marriage is too good to stay quiet about.
And I'm Katieann, senior pastor, wife, mom to four kiddos, and I always love having some fun, even when we're diving into the deep and holy conversations about marriage and sex.
So, welcome to the Sexual Wholeness Revival Podcast. Hi, and welcome back to the Sexual Wholeness Revival Podcast. We are so glad you joined us here today. And I have a hot question, a troubling question. What is the most common problem in marriage that is actually one of the most serious problems? And I'm just going to jump to the punchline here. It is, why is it so hard to talk about sex, even with your own spouse, in the privacy of your marriage? Katieann, has this come up ever in the couples that you work with?
Yeah, all the time. It's actually so much more common than people might realize. So if you're someone in your marriage that is struggling to have these types of discussions with your spouse, don't worry, you're not
For
alone, and
sure.
we've got tools for you. But it is a bit surprising to see how prevalent it is in marriages, the inability to talk about sex.
Mm. Yeah, it's crazy because we think that would be easy. This is the person in the world that I am the absolute closest to. But
Right.
just does not come automatically like that. And we're going to explain why and some steps that you can do to make that easier in your marriage. But I'm going to share a story from my life with this exact situation. And it is involving my wedding night. Let's just be blunt here. And this is, I've told before that I was married previously and divorced and single for 5 years. And then when I got married again, God brought me my wonderful husband that I love today, who's just such a cheerleader for me. We were super excited for our wedding night. We were super excited to be together because we had not had sex. And there was great anticipation going on. And, you go through the whole day of the wedding, wonderful to have friends, the reception. And then finally, it's time for us alone in the privacy of this beautiful location. And we are engaging to pursue in intimacy. And I had a surprise that was not a good one. And that surprise was I encountered pain during
Mm.
intercourse. And I was like, oh God, you got me through everything else that led to this wonderful moment. And now this is what's happening. It did set me back a little and was not what I was expecting. But in that moment, I knew I had a choice, and it totally was just a partnering with God situation. I knew I could shut down. I could ignore it. I mean, there's options. They're not all good options, but there are
Right.
options.
Right.
Or I could be forthright. I could be transparent. I could be vulnerable and share what I was experiencing right then in the moment. And before some of you say, oh, maybe it was nerves, maybe you were tense, maybe you were exhausted. Well, I gave it another go and then I confirmed, no, actually, there was definite pain. So when I'm expressing this to my husband, he was so understanding. Well, he didn't understand it because he wasn't experiencing pain, but he was
Right.
gentle and gracious towards me. And of course, said, well, I don't want you to be in pain. So we were going to do something about this. And as it turned out, we had sexual fun together in playful ways with our intimacy, but we were not able to have intercourse until, hey, we were out of the country and we had to get back home. And I ended up going through pelvic floor therapy, which made a world of difference. And I share that story because it had a happy ending. Did not result in doors being slammed and walls being raised and distance and hurt and shame, which are typical options. But because we already had emotional safety in our relationship and we had trust, we were able to get through those awkward places to find a common ground where we could be there for each other. And I think,
It's amazing.
Katieann, we just take trust for granted, don't we?
We really do. And we don't understand fully sometimes the implications of not having it
Ah,
in our most important relationships. It affects every aspect of that intimate relationship, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, when we don't understand how important how to build trust, but
sure.
also how vital it is in moving forward. And so I've heard people say things, well, I don't bring it up, like I just
Uh,
haven't told them, and we just don't have these conversations,
mm-hmm,
or I could never tell my wife that. And I go, whoa, how can you have true intimacy
for sure.
if you don't have the truth? And you can't have trust if there isn't an exchange of truth
Mm,
happening. And so we do take trust for granted because we don't understand the vital role. I mean, we'll trust them to some extent,
yes,
right?
right.
But the intimate places maybe are lacking the level of trust that they are deserving of.
And at first look, if you ask someone, do you trust your spouse? They're probably automatically going to say yes, but
Of
they
course.
maybe haven't unpacked what it looks like. So I want to give some specifics here so people can see, hey, is this happening in my marriage? And there's a whole range of ways that this can show up when you are not able to talk to your spouse about sex primarily because of a lack of trust. So it might just feel weird and hey, that's uncomfortable, but usually you can get through that. I had a client who had a terrible wedding night, but they also knew they needed to talk it out and they got past the weirdness. Now, if weird is not the end of the spectrum you're on and it's intense, then it could definitely start a fight. And there's
Yeah.
fear that's stirring inside. Oh no, I've got to tell my husband, my wife, this little detail. And it just starts to churn inside of us. And you can get on the defensive and
Right.
take anything that's said like, oh, that's a personal accusation against me. Well, I'm not going to have that. And I'm going to jump up and defend myself. You could go the other extreme and shut down. And as you were mentioning
Right.
some of those examples, and you may think, oh, well, I'm just going to minimize my needs. I'm going to be selfless. But no, if
Right.
you don't include your spouse, you're actually selfish and you are
Yep.
robbing them of the information they need to fully engage and to make a difference.
Right.
You're shortchanging them. You're asking them make a cake, but I'm not going to give you the ingredients. You just have to make it anyhow. Something else that happens that's equally sad is some spouses, and this usually falls onto the wife, that she might continue some of the sexual activities that she doesn't like or she feels are wrong. So now a whole nother level of shame and confusion is happening if you walk that out for very long.
Right. So shame and fear when they are working in your marriage it is really hard to have trust
Yes.
because shame and fear keep us back, hold us back
Hmm.
from telling the truth. If you have a situation like I've heard before where one spouse was a virgin and the other spouse maybe had other partners, sexual partners before they were ever married, saved, you know, there's shame that is brought into the marriage. The one that has no experience may not feel adequate or
Right.
enough compared to the experience, and this other person is bringing in, oh, I've done this with other people for before, and that shame cycle
Yes.
keeps us in a place of withholding truth. And when we withhold truth, we can't have the exchange of trust. And so we really need to understand that if shame and fear of not being enough, how that actually plays into the intimacy in our marriage. And so when you have a wife that says yes to things that they're not comfortable
Hmm.
with, my question to them is there a feeling of, if I don't do this, a fear of, if I don't, what will happen?
Hmm.
Will I be rejected? Will I be, fill in the blanks? And so that dynamic, if you are withholding truth from your spouse, my question to you is, where's the shame piece? Where's the fear piece? And really, for a lot of women, it comes down to, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And for a lot of men, I found, and you could probably speak to this better than I could, but for a lot of men, it's the fear of failure.
Sure.
Like, I've failed here. And so if my wife brings it up, it's a list of my shortcomings, my failure, versus how can I meet your needs?
Wow, we have just unpacked some hurt there. And I just want to take a deep breath and encourage our audience, take a deep breath. If you've been there, you don't have to stay there. And
Yeah.
God has a way out of this place. So I just want to insert some hope as we are going through that. There's one other way that this might play out, and this might be an explanation for you. So, if talking about sex, if that problem is left unaddressed, it can turn into resentment. You can have arguments in your head about your spouse, what they did or didn't do, even if they're not accurate. In your head, by that point, it might feel like that could cause you to create distance, to self protect, to pull away. And at this point, both of you are not having your deep personal needs met. And that
Right.
leaves you subject to looking elsewhere for these needs to be met. Even if you absolutely are committed to never have an affair, to never look outside your marriage, if you're not taking care of these things along the way, you're setting yourself up and your spouse up for these problems, for these ramifications that are much bigger. So you may minimize, oh, well, we just can't talk about sex. But really, we have to get to some of the core issues so we can bring some resolution to this so we can.
Yeah.
And I do have a solution. And I'm going to say it simply, and then we will unpack this a little bit. I think that people don't know what being intimate is. And part of that is
Mm.
because of the trust issue, which, hey, in modern culture, we're not even taught to trust. But we're going to go back to
Right.
the Bible because the Hebrew word that is used, even back in Genesis, for when Adam knew his wife Eve, and that knowing meant that was their intimacy together, their act to conceive children. That word is yada, and it means to know someone as God knows you. And it implies complete acceptance, safety, to see the best in yourself and your spouse with a low to no risk if you reveal yourself. This place of yada is the safety zone. It is so safe because you you want to be there and you are choosing to see your spouse the way that God sees them.
Yeah.
And
So good.
that knowing is scary along the way, but so worth it and satisfying on the other side.
Yeah. So good.
And Katieann, can you give any comments about why couples get to this place, why they don't have the trust?
Yeah. Again, I think, we touched on shame and
Mm-hmm.
we could probably spend a dozen podcasts unpacking fear and shame.
Sure.
And really, this idea of something of being rejected, of being misunderstood, of not being enough,
Right.
of failing is a really big part of why people aren't having the hard challenging conversations with their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to look at that narrative as it is in our own lives first, so we can show up in the relationship a healthier and more whole version of ourselves.
Amen.
But, this place of intimacy, we weren't taught it.
Sure.
And I think that's a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
Mary. Like, we weren't taught it. We were told that that sex is almost this transactional thing. It's
Yes.
it's an obligation in marriage, but we're not really taught or equipped with the tools for what God actually intended intimacy to look like.
Yes.
And so when we ask the questions like, why do we think people struggle with it? One, I think it's the fear and shame
Mm-hmm.
that we have going on individually that show up in our marriage. And two, we're not taught
Yeah. Yeah.
what a healthy intimate relationship actually looks like. It doesn't mean that you just have the most mind-blowing sex all the time, because it starts way before the bedroom. And I
Absolutely.
think you do such a great job of helping people understand this and
Mm-hmm.
bringing clarity for people. Mary, you're just so wonderful at it, but there is a big deficit
Mm.
in Christian marriages because we're not actually taught. It's women, wives submit to your
Oh, yeah.
husband, and husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church. And I'm not saying that isn't true and right,
Yes.
but there's no communication tools. There's no talking about the shame and the fear that almost always get brought in
Yes.
to the bedchamber, into the marriage bed.
Absolutely. Those beliefs that you have about sex started from your childhood, whether it was
Right.
directly communicated or whether it was a message that was just something you watched. And this is challenging to have these conversations, and that's part of why we started the podcast. We need a sexual wholeness revival. We need to get
Yeah.
back to what God intended, and it is a place of wholeness where there is fulfilling connection, where there's fulfilling connection spiritually, physically, emotionally, on every level, and to bring that
Absolutely.
understanding, to spread that understanding so that more and more people know that this is an option for you that maybe you haven't experienced or seen, but it is still an option for you to have a wonderful, fulfilling sex life in your marriage. And let me give some practical steps because I love steps and it helps to kind of put things into bite sized pieces. So, yes, we want you to be able to talk about sex with your spouse, but we also want you to build trust in every area of your marriage. So, here we go. I've just got four. Number one, get your identity in God. And that will bring your self value. That sets the tone for respect. That will be more than enough love for you to flow in emotional safety. So, pretty much, that's
Okay.
foundational. We kind of don't even need other steps, but I have them. Number two is learn to set boundaries. Now, you may be like, oh, wait, I'm married. I don't have boundaries. Well, that's not accurate. Boundaries show that you honor yourself, which means you will manage yourself. So that means you are a safe person. Your spouse does not
So
have
good.
to worry, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? How are they going to show up? I never know which version of my spouse that I'm getting today. No, 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 no. If you are learning self-control and you are able to set the boundaries on you, on how you manage yourself, then that is absolutely going to be life-changing for
Yep.
your marriage. Listen, if you're dating, you can start some of this right now, because I absolutely believe that the level of intimacy that you have, even in a dating relationship, that should be equivalent to the level of trust. You need trust to have true intimacy. Number 3, start with kindness. We miss this and it's powerful. This can be little acts of kindness, bringing coffee to your spouse, sending thoughtful texts, running an errand for them. Hey, get out your love languages. That is going to be a heads up for you on ways you can show kindness. Why do we do it? Well, it shows that I see you,
Yeah.
I know you, I choose you. I mean, power packed words. Kindness,
Yeah.
kindness can do all of that. And then number 4, take baby steps when you're sharing. If this is new, you won't get to the deepest level of intimacy overnight, but you can do the little things and encourage yourself while you're doing it. It is a process. Reassure each other. Hey, this is kind of awkward. We haven't really talked like this before, but you keep on loving even though it has been awkward in the past, because you have a vision of where you can get to on the other side. Yes and amen.
Yep. Yeah. So good.
And one of the reasons that we share all of this is to equip our friends, our couples out there, so that they can enjoy it. And a way that I help to remember and I share it is I use the word gifts as an acronym. This is explaining all of the good that God has for us in sex and marriage. And the G stands for good. We actually unpacked that in our last episode, so you can certainly catch that. The I stands for intimate, and that's what we're talking about today. What does it mean to be intimate? How does that help your sex life? How does that help your entire marriage? The next letter is F, and that describes that your marriage can become fierce when you are realigning your sexual intimacy with God's design. T is the next letter. That stands for timeless. And we have the whole gamut of this childlike wonder on one end of the spectrum, where we can explore and enjoy each other. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we can adjust and mature and meet each other where we are, because we're not talking about a one-night stand. We're talking about a lifelong marriage and a way to express our love. And then S stands for sacred, because of God's design. That's why all of these things work together. His design is amazing. And if you'd like to know more about that, I have an ebook. It's called God's Gift to Marriage. I would love to get it into your hands. The link will be in the show notes, but it's on my website called limitlessintimacy.com. And the reason that it is limitless is because God is our source. God is love. God is abundant with everything we need. It's just up to us to keep turning to Him and realizing, oh, I don't want to do this on my own. I can't do this on my own. I'm so thankful that I get to go to God and that He will be there and continue to supply that. Katieann, any other thoughts before we close?
I just want to say every time you go through the acronym, I just love it, especially the sacred part.
Ah,
It is such an important aspect, I feel, and every time you go through it, even though I've heard it so many times, when you hit sacred, I
mm,
feel it in my spirit, the importance of what he has established for us, what he has created, that
amen.
sacred place in our marriage. And I'm so excited because I believe that we are preparing for a generation and we are making a difference for a generation that we may never see.
Uh,
And that is sacred. That
wow.
is sacred as well.
Wow. Okay, I got the goosebumps on that one too. So
Me
we
too.
just thank you so much for joining us on this journey to the goodness that God intended for marriage with the beauty and the richness of sex and intimacy.
Yeah. And until next time, let's bring back wholeness.